NFL Week 6 is here. Ron and I are going to shoot the bull about last week, this coming week, and some other stuff. And we're not going to sell you anything, and we're not going to ask anything of you. We're not even going to ask you to thumbs up or subscribe or any of that stuff. So, Ron, how you doing today? I hear you've been sleeping in.
Yeah, right. Back at the old house right now. How come you told people we're not going to sell anything? I want to sell this house.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, your house isn't on the market yet, so.
No, it's a lot of things going on. So commuting between two houses this week. Perfect week to do that because if you watched any of our stuff, the second quartile started this past Sunday. And for the most part, it was magical. It was just the way second quartiles need to be. And now we're on to week 6. And I have some thoughts about week 6, later on, and some queries of you, Chris, and queries of me. I'm going to do some homework about past week 6. But what's new?
Well, I had a very good college football week, 16-7, and then I lost a little bit in the NFL. That Baltimore just killed me. So, and I don't want to hear any of your crap that Pittsburgh is the right side and
Which
it's
they
the
were.
history and it's this and it's that. It's just horseshit.
Nobody wants to hear it when it goes that way, but it's one of the things about marrying models with unbelievable situations and hoping they're both on the same side. But when they're not, how much do you trust the model? And how much do you trust the situations? It's a balancing act.
Well, it's frustrating. I don't know whether I forwarded you this stat, but let me find it. I don't want to be lying to the people here. So far this season, teams getting plus 50% of the bets are 44, 27, and 3, 62% against the spread. I think I mentioned it last week that the previous week it was about 7-1, the 8 most popular games. So this relates to your question because it's been frustrating because you look at these games and they look pretty easy. I didn't want to bet some of the games I bet last week, nor the week before. And the square bear obvious plays that usually don't win at a high rate seem to be coming in at a high rate this year. So for somebody like me, it's emasculating in some way because you just feel like an idiot sometimes. But, when you have a decade of history of, success with the model, you got to go through these little down spells. But if the public's winning at that kind of a rate and I'm still up for the season, I should be very happy. And you're chirping away like a little chickadee. You're doing pretty well.
Well, in college we're talking a very, 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 very unsustainable number. But in the NFL, I was below 50% through week 4. But as you know, I had one play on week 4. It's like a baseball player not seeing the ball clearly. When we did our show last Tuesday, everything was crystal clear all of a sudden. When I had the metrics, when I was able to carry things over from this year, forget about last year, when I had the week 5 quartile stuff, and when they matched like that. So like you were surprised on Friday that I would have 7 or 8 plays, and then I had to add Indy because I don't know how Tennessee became a favorite in that game. So I had 9 plays, and not one of them was a 1-star play. They were all 2-star and above. I was just banking on the fact that all of a sudden my numbers were crystallizing. So when I'm not seeing the ball clearly, I want to have the patience to make just one play. And I was below 50% going into last week.
Well, what fun is that? I had a play on every game last week except the Dallas-San Francisco game. So I was getting the shakes there.
9 is pretty good. 9 is more than usual, but that's what week 5 brings.
I misplaced my last week's schedule. Was there anything else about last week I think we've learned that San Francisco's the real deal. Arizona, yeah. The Rams played a little tougher than I kind of expected them to do. That was kind of okay. Carolina's in trouble. The Saints, what the hell was that? The Falcons, they got by. Tampa Bay, they didn't lose. They didn't play. The Lions will probably win that division, and I think they're number 3 in the DVOA offense, number 4 in defense. And even though I hate that stat, I'm going to be a hypocrite and use it when it benefits my team, bragging rights. So the Lions are the real deal. I have them rated near the top of the league legitimately. The Eagles really took care of business. The Cowboys are pretenders. I'm never going to win my McCarthy Coach of the Year ticket now. Broncos, boy, are they in trouble. The Raiders, they win last night, but it gets more embarrassing each week with that coach. Tennessee, I expected more out of them. They just didn't look good. Jacksonville, overrated. I can't believe Colin Cowherd had him have Jacksonville number 6. Could you possibly consider Jacksonville number 6? I thought that was ridiculous. The Ravens seem to be scripted that they have to lose every time they're supposed to win, and vice versa. They're just getting goofy. And then the Bills. There's a takeaway. The Bills are in the exact same shape they were in last year. They were full steam ahead, and then they lose Miller, they lose Milano, they lose Knox isn't practicing, somebody else isn't practicing, and that's really bad for them. So that's what I have to say about last week.
Okay, let me do my quick thoughts on last week, starting with the schedule. You know how I felt about the confluence of factors that made Jacksonville just a super play last week. It was Buffalo's DB, it was the travel, it was the fact that Jacksonville got its offensive tackle back. It's Buffalo off Miami, which was the biggest thing of all. And that was just too good. I'm going to save Atlanta for last because I want to make a point on that. Detroit, yeah, they took care of Carolina. We knew they would. Indy, Tennessee, I just don't understand how Tennessee has earned the right to be a road favorite. I mean, that flipped and it became a power play, and that was fine. The Giants were in a horrible spot against Miami. The Giants aren't that good a team anyway. They're now tied for last in my power numbers. But Miami's number was actually a little inflated, but it was a great game to pass, to not worry about. New England disappointed me. I thought they would hold down New Orleans' defense. They did, but New England is averaging 11 points on offense this year. We could get back into that. And so that was one of my losers in the New England game. Pittsburgh, for a variety of factors, 39th time Tomlin and Harbaugh have played each other. Anytime you get 3 or more points, just do it and thank the lucky underdog. Obviously, Harbaugh lost the game. They had a chance to take a 10-point lead. It's amusing to me that people still think he's a good coach, but that's a different story. The only thing with Arizona, 1 in 3 teams, Arizona, Cincinnati, is that Arizona just doesn't have the players. They're doing fine. They're doing everything asked of them. They're not making critical mistakes. They just don't have a great roster. They're trying. Philly and the Rams, kind of to your point, I think the Rams did well in that game. I think the Eagles did well in that game. That was a tough game going in just because they were, the Rams are doing fine. The Rams are a different team than last year, but Philly is still Philly, a very deep team with a quarterback, wide receivers, a bunch of running backs, a good front four, so on and so forth. I thought the Jets, I think you did too, were in a good spot against Denver. Denver's metrics were just bad, so that didn't surprise me. I lost on a power play with Dallas, one of my losers last week. It was a fantastic week for me, but that was a mistake. San Francisco is the best team in football, and they have definitely proven it to me. I liked Vegas, well, especially as a dog. I do spend a lot of time taking week 5 plays early because it's such an important week for me. That one was important to take Vegas as a dog. But let's talk about Atlanta and a point that you made last week. You made this point where we talked about waiting for 2.5 and 3 on the Jet game or something like that. And then you talked about how valuable the 2 is, that the 2 is becoming more important in the NFL. And look what happened. I'm sitting there with a 3-star play on Atlanta -1. You're sitting there telling people to take Houston +2.5. The game turns out to be flip a coin. I don't think I was particularly right about Atlanta. I liked what Atlanta could do against Houston because of Houston's horrific pass D. It was a good get-right spot for Ritter. But then again, Stroud hasn't done anything wrong, and Atlanta has no pass rush. So in a sense, we were both right, we were both wrong, and we both won. That's the value of 2. So I want to bring up your point again about why points matter.
Yeah, well, I lost +1.5 in the contest, so that was annoying. So onward and upward to this very exciting Denver Bronco Kansas City game. 25-mile-an-hour winds expected, as high as somewhere around there. The under's been hit. I took a position on the under. I think Denver beat Kansas City last year, even one of their few wins, didn't they?
0-14, so no. They have not won in a long, long time against Kansas City.
Oh, okay. So this is probably the week.
Yeah. So this is a homework assignment for me. You can add your thoughts in. You heard me talk about how important it was for 1 and 3 teams in certain situations. I won't give away the whole thing, but 1 and 3 teams with their backs against the wall tend to be good plays. 3 and 1 teams tend to be, a little lethargic and stuff like that. What happens if a 1 and 3 team loses? And there are 5 of them this week. So Denver is one of the 1 and 3 teams that lost last week. This is my homework assignment. I want to know what 1 and 4 teams off a loss have done in game number 6. So just to let people know, maybe we'll update people on Friday with the Inside Blitz. 1 and 4 teams off a loss. What happened to them the next game? Because if we're right that coaches think in quartiles and they just messed up the second quartile, how are the players aren't thinking great things. In Denver, they just lost a home game to the Jets. In New England, Bill Belichick has no answers whatsoever. In the Giants, Minnesota, which was, Chris, you and I believe, think the same way. Minnesota was the right side against Kansas City, but they can't get out of their own way.
Yeah, it was. Well, I actually had to play Kansas City when it got down to 3, so I was happy that they couldn't get out of their own way. So I'm not sure what they do in the game 6, but I have to imagine, as you kind of alluded to, that it just sucks. I mean, this is where the deflating balloon starts to make a louder pitch of air expelling. Because I have to imagine it's harder to get up for those practices and harder to have that same, harder to have any optimism. And, even if most of the team has it, you start to lose some players along the way and with certain organizations. So unfortunately, I feel like I'm going to be on several of them at least. So I hope I'm wrong.
Well, I'll try to give you the results of that data and I don't know what it's going to lead. It may be nothing, but it just speaks to the point that even off a really good week, I don't want to be complacent. I don't usually like week 6s. In fact, I've gone to watch tennis tournaments during week 6 and stuff like that. It's just not. It's not the start of a quarto. It doesn't have the same pizzazz for me. It's kind of been a blah week. So I want to do this homework assignment, and I encourage people to always learn or test themselves or try out some hypothesis and do these things even during the year, because the results might be very interesting. I don't know what I'll find. Maybe all these teams that go 1 and 4 end up going 1 and 5. And it's not going to be 1 year study. I'm going to try to go back 4 or 5 years.
Not much to say on that Thursday game. 10-point spread. That's where the line's supposed to be. Root for the under.
Yeah.
This Baltimore team is going to drive me insane. In the last 3 years, they're just driving me nuts. They're already in London, I believe, and Tennessee's coming in at the end of the week. So different scheduling there. I have to see if that matters, but you would think that this is a get right spot for them. Maybe they'll only drop 3 or 4 balls this week. What do you think?
Well, Baltimore already is in London. They've decided that they want to acclimate a little bit more. I don't know whether you acclimate in a certain number of days or not certain number of days or whatever. They're off that loss to Pittsburgh. It's never easy to play a game after Pittsburgh. They're doing it because they got blown out the only other time they were in London. And John Harbaugh said as much. He basically said that we got blown out last time, so we're trying something different. What they should do is try to coach differently. I don't like laying points in Baltimore right now against other physical teams or teams. Where Tennessee has a habit of stopping the run. So Lamar Jackson is going to be forced to pass again. And we saw what happened last week with a team that doesn't stop the run as well as Tennessee and Pittsburgh, but they know everything. Pittsburgh knew everything that Baltimore was going to throw at them. I don't know. Trusting Baltimore is a favorite right now, and I'm looking at this almost for the first time. As you know, I didn't do any advanced work early this week, but it doesn't strike me as a game that I'm going to be jumping all over on.
I wish I could ignore those games. Unfortunately, I can't. The one game I think that is easy to ignore is this Washington-Atlanta game.
Washington, Atlanta. What can I tell you about that? To me, without doing any work, I would say first look that I would do is take the dog +3, no matter who it was in this kind of game. Why would you trust a favorite with two kind of teams that are, Atlanta may have a good record at the end of the year, but it's basically because they play two divisions, their own and in the AFC, that are presumed the weaker divisions. Their power ratings are clearly in the bottom half of the NFL. So, and I want kind of no business with Atlanta until they learn to sack the quarterback. Washington has allowed 29 sacks. It'll be very interesting to see if Atlanta can have more than 1 sack a game, because that's all they've had. Bertie made a point in the chat that talks about the Ravens and Spears rushing overs and so on. I made a point in an article on Wager Talk today. I think eventually Henry of Tennessee is going to be phased out of their offense. It's kind of a bold point, but I think Henry will not be with the team in 2024.
I thought, but he had picked it up and was on fire. What happened to him last week? I never noticed.
13 carries in a close game against Indianapolis. Past Tennessee teams would have run Henry twice as much. They would have run him to death in that game and then try to wear out the other team, which you could have done against Indy. They have a relatively average defense against the run. And Henry gets stronger in general as the season goes on and as the game goes on. I thought it was interesting that Spears was in the game a lot longer than he used to, than he was in a couple of the other games. And with the game on the line, Henry wasn't in there all the time.
Well, this under 46 is looking pretty good on Cincinnati if you guys can find it to bet anywhere. I see it at South Point and Win. A couple of offshore places, but that's what I was doing.
Question about that game. This was the line that I was most off on. And I want to know if this is what I would call a tip-off line, where I made the line. I did not expect Cincinnati to be 2.5-point favorites. I thought, based on my numbers, the power ratings would come a lot closer. But is it an overreaction to Cincinnati's win against Arizona last week? Is it because the public or the odds makers think Burrow's healthy? Or is this just a line saying that here we go? I think Cincy matches up. I think they should be the favorite by 2.5, maybe even 3 points.
You think that's too much?
I thought it was too much based on my numbers.
Well, what was the look ahead line, Ron?
That I don't know. Especially last week, I was concentrating on just week 5.
Well, make sense out of this. Cincinnati kicks ass, and I don't think Seattle did any harm taking the week off. And the look ahead line was 3, and this week it's 2.75. So how does that happen?
Well, that's what I think. I think this is a fishy line. It's not an indication that I like Seattle in the game. It's an indication that, wait a second, I need to take Cincinnati seriously in that game. And that's my thought process. I had no preconceived idea on the line when I set my line. Then I look at what the odds are. I never try to look at the odds before I set my line. And then I look and say, whoa, how did that happen? What happened to Seattle? Did they lose 8 players or something like that? And then I do a little bit more work and say, no, something's going on here that they recognize that either due to matchups or or something that I have to look at this time. It makes me want to take Cincinnati before I do work.
Boy, their schedule is just great. They go to Detroit, then they come home, then they go to the Giants, and then they go home. Now they're back all the way over to see Cincinnati. What a travel schedule.
Yeah, are they the ones with kind of an alternating all year long?
I think so.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. I really like Pete Carroll. I think but this is a weird situation. And we talked about this very briefly last week, but it's worth bringing up now because we have had our first bye weeks. Some of these teams lose momentum. I think we talked about that in college, actually, and we hit on one of them.
Yeah, Miami and Florida lost outright.
Yeah, of course, the way they did it was pretty comical, but they still had virtually no chance to cover the 20-point spread or something like that. That's right. So I'm not sure the bye was good for Seattle.
No, that's a good point that I hadn't thought of. But this is a hard game to really quantify, and because the numbers are obviously Seattle. Cincinnati looked a little shaky to start, and then they seem to get their act together, and they're missing whatever his name is, the receiver, and Higgins, yeah. And they come out smelling like a rose, and I kind of thought, well, they'll come home, and this will be a 3 and might even hit a strong 3. Even a possible 3.5. Everybody's going to get behind them, and we're not seeing that. We're seeing a lot of Seattle love also. So I'm actually kind of surprised at the 2.75 line.
Okay. I kind of think that it'll get two-way action. I think there'll be people liking Seattle. I think there'll be two-way action. I don't think it could stay at 3. But here's the thing regarding metrics and modeling. How much do you want to trust Cincinnati's numbers when Burrow was 40%, 50% of himself? What if Burrow, if I'm correct, their bye week is next. This is it. And then they have their bye week. I don't know.
Well, some people were talking about just wiping out the week 1 lines or the week 1 stats.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, that's not something I do. It's more of a manual handicap.
Something to keep on the back burner, especially for quarterbacks like we've talked about before, who saw no action in preseason. Why should we keep that week 1? Yeah,
you're right. They have a bye next week.
Yeah. So I think we'll see a different Cincinnati team. I'm not sure this week, but I think after the bye, you have to massage. I think you have to take the first 3 weeks of Joe Burrow's season and say, let's not put it directly in the model. I know you do something that hasn't come into play probably right now, but you will talk about it week 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, where you do last 3 weeks, last 5 weeks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think once you get that data and you're further removed from Joe Burrow's first 3 weeks, or pick any team like that, I think you're going to have an edge when you do it that way. The question is, how fast do we do it for Joe Burrow?
Well, I have to see another game. That's for sure. I'm not adjusting anything. Even if I were to make adjustments, the the numbers are so far apart that it wouldn't even make a difference. So it's a screwy situation, and hopefully we're able to get more context after this game. But speaking about the momentum, Tampa Bay and the Browns off the bye. It looks like Cleveland is not going to have Watson. So that's good for my San Francisco early bets.
Cleveland's not going to have Watson. Oh, boy. I mean, San Francisco's obviously firing on all cylinders.
That's not a given yet, but all indications, reading the tea leaves, it doesn't look like he's going to go. So that's going to hurt them. Not that they were really on a roll, but and then you have Tampa Bay. They were doing okay.
Yeah, I also think that not so much Cleveland, because they probably needed the bye week in the hopes that Watson would play, but Tampa, I think that momentum takes a little shift here, and that's a dangerous game for Tampa. Cleveland's going to be interesting because this will be a test for San Francisco's offense, which is because Cleveland's playing really good defense, and they're going to have to, whether Watson's in or not in, the defense is going to have to rise to the occasion, because I don't think Cleveland can afford to get in any kind of shootout with a healthy or not healthy quarterback there. So it'll be interesting to see if there's anything that can disrupt Brock Purdy from doing what he's been doing in the first 5 weeks.
Well, Cleveland fell from number 1 defense. So we skipped the Vikings and the Bears. Boy, what a
scintillating game.
Yeah, the under got pounded down pretty heavily. The weather's going to be rainy and windy, and it was 46 and a half. It's 43 and a half some places. 44s. Boy, I don't know what to make out of that game. Do you think there's any chance that they get rid of Cousins at this point?
Not during the season.
No, I didn't think so.
But for Minnesota, they've accomplished a rare feat. This is very hard to do, but they've had a minus turnover ratio in every single game this season. And it's cost them. They really, with equal turnovers, they would be 4-1.
Sure, they would. You gotta feel bad for him. I mean, you watch that Cousins documentary. You gotta like that guy, and you want to root for him, and it's just unfortunate.
It's more fumbles, I think, than interceptions. How many? Let's see. How many interceptions has Cousins thrown? He's thrown 4 in 5 games. It's a little bit high. It's not unreasonable because they throw a lot, and they're definitely without Justin Jefferson this week.
Well, with that Bears defense, as long as you just have bodies,
yeah,
I've got to imagine the backups on the Vikings can catch the ball better than the Ravens starters.
Well, I mean, Chicago, it's kind of a weird situation because with Jefferson out, that's good for Chicago, but it also means the line dips under 3, which is bad for Chicago because Chicago needs all the points they can get. It might be a stay away just because of the situation, or it might be a stay away because if you lose a bet on either team, you feel like, why did I bet on either of those teams? And that's the problem. But Minnesota's another 1-4 team off a loss.
They're what?
1-4, and they just lost. Where Chicago is 1-4, but at least they feel good about what happened the last 2 weeks, and they're on a win. So I would probably trust Chicago more in this game, but I do know that fumbles are random, and it's
you're going to trust Chicago
more than Minnesota?
Okay, I
don't know. What have you seen from Minnesota that makes you excited?
They consistently score every game.
Okay, same score, same amount of points per game as Chicago. I'm not advocating for Chicago. I'm just saying in our brainstorming session here, why would you trust Minnesota?
Who's the better defense?
Better defense? Oh God, neither one has a defense. They both allow over 70%. The Bears are worse at protecting their quarterback. They're exactly the same against the run. Minnesota I would say has a slightly better defense.
Well, I've got them like 9 spots higher. So
yeah, well, in terms of power rating, I have them about 11 spots higher. But I don't trust them.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you get your superstar out of the game, or he's gone for at least a month, and they're 1-4. You get a little bit nervous backing these teams, and a lot of people are going to feel that way. I have to imagine that when it comes to game day, people are going to remember what they saw last on Thursday Night Football with the Bears, and the Bears are going to get some money, and that creates value on the Minnesota side if they show up, and we'll just have to see.
Yeah, it's a funny game because the Minnesota season is practically over. Even if they win this game and they go to 2-4, they're still without Jefferson for 3 more weeks, and they'll play supposedly better teams. Whether they like it or not, it's in their subconscious. They're 1-4. They're worried about holding on to the football. They're an incomplete team right now. At some point, we're probably going to see Minnesota win a game 35-10. But it's going to be a misnomer because their roster defensively isn't good enough, and without Jefferson, you lose one of the 2 best receivers in the game right now.
Yeah, well, they have the second best tight end or third best tight end, don't they? Fourth?
Minnesota? Yeah, well, Hawkinson missed some time last week too. Both he and Jefferson were out in the 4th quarter.
Oh, New Orleans.
Sorry about that.
New Orleans is such an enigma. But that was a case of New England just being abysmal.
Question for you. Where do you have New Orleans overall defensively?
I have them ahead of Cleveland.
So you have number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's their strength, and they're relatively healthy right now defensively, and they didn't have to do anything offensively because New England did everything for them. New England just basically lost the game. New Orleans is not a well-oiled machine offensively. This is an interesting test because Houston's playing, still above expectations.
Well, what are they going to? I mean, this is a difficult game because Houston has no running game, right?
Houston has no running game. Absolutely. They're one-dimensional, and yet a rookie quarterback has not thrown an interception. I think that's an amazing stat.
I think we go the over on the interceptions this week. What do you say?
Yeah, it's interesting because my notes say interception coming this week.
Yeah.
I think we do get the over. We'll probably get a decent price, like -115, -120. It won't be plus money because it's the New Orleans defense.
What would you lay on that, the highest number?
Highest number I'd lay is probably stretching it 125. I don't want to lay something that gets worse than 50-50. They're not running well, but they understand what kind of a game this is. Stroud's doing amazing things. And what if New Orleans offense doesn't contribute, even though they should against Houston, where Houston is not enforced to throw situations? I think 125. I prefer to lay 120 or less.
Why can the Saints not get anything going offensively? I mean, what's their malfunction? How do you see it?
Philosophically, Dennis Allen is old school. He's had a long time offensive quarterback coach who became offensive coordinator, who's following the dictations of what Dennis Allen wants to do. I think it's a backward strategy. I think they signed Derek Carr because they thought he could stretch the field and he can do some things and he can take them out of this dinosaur methodology. but I haven't seen it so far. They're averaging 19 points a game. So I think they have the players. They certainly have a much better rotation at wide receiver. They have Kamara back. They scored 34 points last week, but did they really score 34 points last week? They were kind of gifted it. They had under 300 total yards in the game. So I think it's coaching more than anything. I think that roster should be averaging 5 to 6 more points a game, a TD more. And we're going to find out a little bit more about it against Houston, because you should be averaging more points against Houston.
It just seems like the New Orleans every year about this time makes a little push and scares the crap out of everybody. That's what I fear in this game, that possibly the Saints have another big victory, potentially. I'm just saying. And then all of a sudden, as you already mentioned, they already had the number one defense. If they start to show signs of an offense, and all of a sudden people are talking about the Saints, and it seems to happen every year. And then the defense gets all injured by, halfway part.
Yeah, if they can keep the defense healthy, which they didn't last year, and now they have a stretch the field quarterback, they can have run pass balance. And for coaches like Dennis Allen, the play action pass becomes of the utmost importance, because he's not all that. He's not going to have a creative play calling structure. He has Taysom Hill on the roster, but he only gets 5-6 touches, except for that one game where they really used him. I think if they're creative, they have the roster to get this done. Their offensive line isn't as good as we remember it 2, 3, 4 years ago, but it's still good enough with the weapons that they have.
So this is a really ugly spot for the Jags coming home off the long trip. But the Colts are missing their quarterback. Who do they have behind Minshew?
I don't know who they have behind Minshew. Minshew is one of those guys that's going to complete a large number of passes for a small number of yards. That's just the way it is. These yards per reception on some of these teams, it's pretty distorted. You have some that are really stretching the field and some that are not. And here in, it's a big difference. I don't know what to think but Anthony Richardson of Indianapolis is winning me over a little bit as a raw rookie. And then we go to Gardner Minshew, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, now they're easier to scheme against because you know exactly what Minshew is all about.
Well, it seems like a nice teaser leg possibly, but oh no, I'm mixing it up. Jacksonville got bet up, and then it's getting bet back down. It hit resistance at the 4.5, and now it's back. It's 4.5 again, up and down. But it just seems like a tough spot. I'm just surprised somebody would think that team is a top 10 team at this point. It just dumbfounds me.
Let me see where I have them.
I mean, I think they're the better team. Don't get me wrong, but I have
them 10th.
You have them 10th?
Jacksonville, yeah.
Jesus.
Sorry.
Well, you've been moving. You haven't been watching the games or anything, right?
Right. I think Jacksonville will be bet up by game time.
Okay.
I mean, that's my guess. I don't particularly like Jacksonville in this spot. So if I end up liking Indianapolis, I'm just going to wait. I don't think there's any rush to bet Indianapolis.
Well, then pull out your crystal ball, and where does this Miami line finish?
30.
30?
Yeah.
Not even I have it that high.
There is no crystal ball for what Miami's speed is bringing. Carolina has a relatively decent defense, but it gets tired at the end because their offense doesn't stay on the field long enough. That's the problem. I don't have a problem with Carolina's defense still, but obviously the offense isn't doing that well. I don't know the allure of Frank Reich as head coach. When does that wear off? Because he finished his career in Indy all over the place. He kept bringing in quarterbacks and nothing happened. And now there's nothing magical happening in Carolina, and the roster is not going to get that much better because they're without number one draft picks over the next couple of years. So he's got to get it done. He's not a new coach in a way, but he is a new coach with this team. He doesn't know any of the players. So Carolina desperately needs to bye week.
Do you think Carolina gets any benefit having coming off playing a team like the Lions, who have their act together offensively?
Well, they're playing Miami, who has their act together offensively. So this is a complete stay away game. Let's just put it that way.
That's not okay. I thought that was going to be your biggest bet of the week, but
yeah.
So how's that break going to treat the Tampa Bay? They moved this game to a late afternoon game. It was scheduled for an early start time. So, and it is the best game objectively in the afternoon.
So it's not really true that it pains me to say this, but it pains me to say this. On Wager Talk, I wrote about your Detroit Lions.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I had to do it. I mean, talked about them in glorious terms. They're probably lower on my overall power ratings than you, but I have them tied for 6th.
Okay.
I mean, is that bad? Is that the best they've been in the last decade, 2 decades, whatever?
Their offensive metrics are since they started charting all these, I think it was a DVOA number that I saw, is so far ahead of any of those decent teams. The Lions did have some decent offensive teams with Barry and, the Megatron and they used to score. They went to the NFC Championship one year, and they had decent teams. And this team is just makes those teams look like garbage. So I don't know. I know Tampa Bay's defense is getting healthier. This is not a game the Lions should lose, in my opinion. I don't know how to. I think Tampa Bay's. I don't know. People want to back Mayfield, and they showed signs of life. They're leading the division with a 3-1 record, but I just think these teams are in different classes.
Well, the line, I would have made the line 4. So I'm higher than the odds. So I would agree. I think Detroit is a little bit undervalued in this game. Tampa has a +7 turnover ratio, which, to their credit, with a veteran defense and with the way Mayfield manages the game, I could understand having a plus turnover ratio. But +7 is pretty high. And they've only played 4 games, so it's almost 2 plus turnovers a game. So you're talking they're receiving almost 7 full points because of turnover margin, which kind of inflates their value. If you think they're going to have 0 turnover, if you think Detroit and Tampa will have the same number of turnovers in this game, then you're really adding 3.5 points of Detroit value. And I think that's the key.
And they would be, you take those turnovers away, they'd be outscored by their opponents. So that's the difference. If they even out, I don't think that they can keep up.
Roger makes a point. This is the beauty of asking questions and watching us live. I like Roger's point because I hadn't thought of this one, so that's good. He says Colts are better with Minshew and now dual star running backs. But the other thing he says is in-season revenge. This is the first time I think we have a repeat game. We're always looking for that second game in a conference matchup. And
it's
we
fresh.
have one right away. It's very fresh. So yes, Indianapolis lost 31-21 at home to Jacksonville to start the season. Very first game for Richardson and that group. And now we talked about Jacksonville coming off of London, 2 weeks in London and so on. And Indianapolis will be focused and motivated. Now we just have to look at the stat sheet, study that a little bit more careful, see what Minshew could do. because it is early in season revenge for the Colts.
Those are excellent points. It's very, very, very good. I cannot believe that after last night that the Raiders are teetering on 3.5. How can that be possible?
Well, it's possible because of everybody's opinion of New England. I think this is not a reaction to the Raiders. I think this is a reaction to that New England has really sunk. You're talking about they replaced Matt Patricia and Joe Judge with Bill O'Brien, and they're averaging 11 points a game.
Geez, it's a meeting of the bottom five. It's unbelievable. And Belichick, he's not going to let this guy stick around forever to break the record. I think he's done. There's no coming back out of this. I think he's lost the team too. Do you think he has the team anymore?
I think he's lost the clout. I think what he's missing is Devin McCourty. He's missing that guy who in the locker room, he was a Belichick man for 12, 13, 14 years. He retired after last season. They drafted a little bit better in the secondary, and they're still fundamentally sound, but they're missing that experienced leadership. There's not that many people have been around. Matthew Slater's been around, but he's mostly used on special teams. He could rally the troops to a point, but he's not in on all these other meetings that are so important, and understanding that you stay the course with Belichick. But the worst thing is the two areas he prides himself on the most are imploding. We're talking about turnovers. They never have a minus turnover ratio, and they're -8 right now.
Wow.
They're either the worst or the second worst in all of the NFL. And he'll bench people for turnovers, but how can you bench the entire team? And then special teams, the thing that Belichick prides himself on, going and scouring the nation for this, that, and whatever, his kicker is about 50% right now. These are areas that are his bread and butter. And when those areas are starting to implode, how do you get behind him? I mean, I'm not advocating Vegas because I don't think they're a good favorite in any situation. McDaniel has made numerous mistakes. He tried desperately to give away that game last night.
I think you have to ding whatever your metric rating is. I think you have to ding it more because of the coaching. This guy makes egregious errors every game.
Well, even if you can't find a way to put it in the model, which is something to think about in the offseason, you have to consciously think about it when you're deciding to play or not to play. Is this a good line? What are you going to do? What about a coaching decision? I've thought about it for years with John Harbaugh at Baltimore, and it's worked spectacularly. But if I don't watch out, I may have to think about it for about 8 coaches in the NFL, 10 or whatever. I mean, if you look at it, Green Bay, we won't get to them because they don't play this week. But Green Bay tried to give away the game as fast as the Raiders tried to give away the game. Why are they throwing downfield with Jordan Love when his success rate downfield through 5 games is horrendous?
Those Arizona Cardinals, that defense looked really bad the few times I checked in on that game. And then you look at Stafford and the 2 receivers he has. This could be a dangerous game. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm not much of a favorite player, but I couldn't touch Arizona in this spot. The Rams haven't played well at home against Arizona in the series. But before we say, let's use that information, we can't really use that information because the Arizona staff is completely new. So it doesn't matter to them how they did in the past. It only matters what's going on right now. And what's going on right now is that Arizona lost a lot of their players at linebacker in the secondary. And the people that are playing linebacker in the secondary cannot defend Cooper Kupp, cannot defend the tight end Tyler Higbee. They just aren't good enough. They're trying their darndest. But here's another case of a quarterback, Joshua Dobbs of Arizona, who's throwing passes for 6 yards. They're basically not stretching the field. And now they lost their running back, Connor.
He's
Arizona, This has blowout written all over it. If you trust the Rams as a big favorite, I don't know if I do, but I mean, for as hard as Arizona's trying, they're 1-4, and they're still possibly going to be under their win total.
Those Eagles are looking better and better each week.
Yeah,
the Jets can't catch a break. They lost their only decent offensive lineman. Where do they go from here? Jesus.
Well, and they're off a win. So spirits are high. They started the second quartile just the way they wanted. So no dinging of the Jets. They're fine. Maybe they get a win against Philly because, as I understand it, somebody could double check me on this. They have never beaten the Philadelphia Eagles. They're 0-12. So
they're in this playoff race, you realize. The hardest part of their schedule is done after this game.
Yeah.
So the rest of the season. What?
You got to trust Zach Wilson, and that's going to be hard.
I know. God, he just looks so bad.
Mm-hmm. Hey, good to hear from Mr. Rivera. Hi there. It's interesting. Let me say this. Philadelphia, we feel like they're winning ugly, and how are they doing it? They're not playing their best, yet they're 3-1-1 against the spread. And some people would say they're actually 4-1 against the spread this year. So they're still doing what odds makers expect them to do, even though it doesn't look pretty.
Yeah, I think that's, they don't feel like they're not coming out and blowing out people. They're just kind of taking care of business. They've got that same kind of vulnerability that Kansas City had last year. Remember, where they just were kind of skating by? Is that weakness or is that strength? It turned out to be strength for Kansas City in the long run. So just something to keep an eye on. Just tough to get involved on that one.
Yeah,
the Giants Bills. What's your line on that game?
I made it 14.
Okay.
I would 18. I think the line, according to my power numbers, would be 15, but I made it 14 for there must have been some injury or something that went on. Oh, Matt Milano. I had to downgrade them a little bit for that, and I think they lost another guy too. We're starting to see some cluster injuries.
Apparently, I didn't realize this. Von Miller wanted to take Von Miller to London. He hadn't been, so he was in no position to play, and that's just a shame. And that I don't know what the hell they were thinking, but apparently he's not going to be in playing shape for a while. And we know what happened to this team when Milano was out last year, so it's going to be interesting. The metrics on my model have this like off on Pluto, but
it's ugly. It's ugly.
It's so ugly. But if I had to play the game, I'd probably play the Giants.
Well, there are three factors of handicapping for me. There's the power rating, there's the situational, and there's the metrics matchup analysis. And the matchup analysis is not in the New York Giants' favor. I mean, they're in serious trouble if they have to protect any quarterback. If you do get Daniel Jones again, I'd rather have Tyrod Taylor, by the way. I think
he's playing this week, isn't he?
Much better internal clock. And that's going to be important because the Giants have allowed 6 sacks per game. That's a lot.
6? They're averaging 6?
Yeah, they've allowed 30, 17 or 18 in the last 2 weeks. They're on pace for 102 sacks allowed, which would shatter the record, and which is nothing to be proud of, put it that way.
Herbert's finger was absolutely mangled, and two weeks isn't going to fix that problem. They're going to have an angry Cowboys coming in. That's going to be an interesting game. Dallas hasn't really proven anything. They haven't beaten a decent team yet. And the Chargers get that overwhelming home field advantage. Not
right. No home field for them, even on a Monday night. But my favorite game of the week, because it's fascinating, the chess match that's going to go on here. First thing is that Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator for Dallas. There was kind of a mutual parting in a weird sort of way, and now he's with the Chargers. So they've had 2 weeks to study Dallas. We talked about teams that didn't, like Tampa. Maybe that's not a good bye week for them. This was a good week for the Chargers to be off. They have to acclimate without Mike Williams. They have to somehow figure out how easy it is for their quarterback to throw the ball. And I'm sure they've experimented during the week. They want to put him in the most comfortable situations. Austin Eckler hasn't played in a while, so they get him back. This is an unbelievably perfect spot for the Chargers to have had a bye week. They also had to replace the player they traded, Jackson. They traded him to New England, so they're mixing in new rotations as far as the secondary. As bad
that is
as
amazing
Dallas,
timing for their bye. It couldn't have come at a better time.
As bad as Dallas looked last week, we want to discount that, and I want to discount that. You're never quite as bad as your last week, but this kind of feels like wrong team favored.
Yeah, I was just looking at. I mean, it just can't go to the Chargers favored, but it feels wrong. It's just like what we were talking about at the top of the show, where your numbers say the line should be one thing, and you look at it, and it seems to have Chargers written all over it.
Yeah, my power ratings would make it Dallas 2. So no advantage in the power rating. The situation is in favor of the Chargers.
Well, what else is on your mind? Anything?
I think we hit just about a lot of. Oh, I do want to bring up one. I don't think I brought it up. One controversial topic.
Oh, the point spread thing. You wanted to ask me a point spread question.
Yeah, I think I covered that with Atlanta.
Oh,
number 2. Yeah. But I want to bring up something that not necessarily for you, but for the people who follow you. When you're talking about teasers and parlays and so on, I'm still kind of on the side of the fence that says, if you're going to do teasers and parlays, do it when you have clarity. I wouldn't recommend, this is personally for me, so I want you to react to this. I wouldn't necessarily recommend somebody getting involved in parlays and teasers who's not hitting a high percentage of straight bets right now, because I think they're not seeing the ball clearly. If you're missing something and then you're trying to win 2 games because you're teasing them and parlaying them, I don't care about the points. You're missing the boat because you're not getting clarity right now. This isn't a layering question, because I understand that. This is a question about teasers and parlays and going off the grid when your straight plays are not working. Does that make sense?
Well, my philosophy on the teasers or the parlays is nearly every one of them are teams that my model says to bet on the point spread. So, example, I don't have a wager on the Commanders Atlanta. I've got that number so close. So I'm not going to tease that game. But another game, like I might want to put a teaser on. So, I have the lifetime 57% win rate. So if my model's telling me at a 57% rate that this team is good on the point spread, well, what's the extra value when I'm playing it on the money line or the teaser? And that's why I get away with it. And that's why it's a benefit. Example, Baltimore. It's a 6:30 in the morning game. It's an isolated game. Why in the hell would I lay 4 points? You know, I can't talk myself into laying 4 points when I can just put them into a handful of parlays with teams that I'm playing later on in the day. And if Baltimore loses, okay, that's fine. I can still bet the other teams.
Yeah. But philosophically, people, let's say, who don't follow your picks as much, or they're doing it on their own and stuff like that, if they're losing on Baltimore and they say, well, wait a second, I still think Baltimore is a good team, but I want to tease them or I want to parlay them or so on. Do they really know that Baltimore is a good team? Or, I mean, do you really want to do things with them? I mean, I could, if you really want to get into the network of nitty gritty of teases, taking Baltimore and teasing them when they're a dog is a pretty good thing because they're in every game. The reason why they're in every game is because they find ways to blow them. Didn't we talk about that last week? How maybe we should just take Baltimore in the first half and then just go against them whenever they're up by double digits and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I don't listen to myself.
In fact, we said that. We were talking about that.
I know. I'm the one that brought it up. You know,
yeah.
I got to listen to an entire day of watching those drop passes and everybody going, what the hell? They blew the game. They should have won. And
yeah. No, but the thinking there is still, if you're looking to take 2 games instead of 1 game, but you haven't been doing well on 1 games, I think you've got to lay the foundation before you start adding on the extra parts to your house.
Well, I strongly advise people not to be, it's hard enough to win 1 game. And the reason I feel comfortable doing it is because of my history and I'm using metrics. I don't think it's smart for people to be doing teasers necessarily, other than just completely, recreationally for small money.
But Chris, how many other shows and how many other tweets do you see where people are throwing out teases left and right for no rhyme and reason, thinking that those 6 points or 6.5 points are going to matter, and not understanding, or maybe they don't keep records, so they don't know that they're losing every time they weigh 120, 130, or whatever it is. I just think it's ridiculous.
Well, I for the life of me, I cannot believe, with all these shows and all these people talking about teaser strategy, that I see people recommending teasers. Like, I'm seeing more people recommend teasers that are bad than are good. What is wrong with these people that they don't understand at this point that you don't take teasers from certain numbers and have them land on certain numbers? Yeah. If you say you're doing this for a living or you're sharing picks and you're advising, dumb shit teasers, I don't know how it's possible anymore. How can you be so obtuse that you don't know this? If you don't understand how to place the teasers in the first place, how the hell are you ever going to win? It's hard enough to pick the teams. I mean, everything is stacked against you. Incredulous what I've seen over the last few weeks of what people have recommended. I'm just beside myself.
Yeah, no, I just think it's be careful. That's just the words I would use. Be careful. The kind of stuff that we do when we're brainstorming and the kind of stuff that we do on the Inside Blitz with Ted on Friday is we try to dissect a game, who's going to win, what the point spread is, and so on. We're not, my initial thoughts is you have to break down the game first before you even think about teases and whatever. And hopefully that process is the most important process. What do you think about that particular team? Not what do you think about that team with 6 extra points? What do you think about that team and the matchup?
That's my point, is you don't sit there and say that's insurance. It's not, oh, well, I don't think they're going to win, but it's going to make the difference. Boy, you know what? Why are you on that team? And then every week you've got teaser busters. You had a teaser. You have teaser busters that just really cause problems. I know people will just bet those Wong teasers on the blind, and they go down. They go down.
Yeah.
I'm talked out, Ron. I don't have anything else to say. My gas tank's on empty. I've been up since 2 days ago.
We will talk again on Friday with the Inside Blitz with Ted. I don't particularly remember which games are. I can tell you that a week from Friday, they're going to be dynamite games. I don't remember this week's games. I want to say that it might be Arizona and the Rams in the afternoon.
Yeah, well, let's not speculate.
Yeah, we won't speculate. Either way, come join us on Friday and we'll have more stuff.
That sounds good. I'll catch you later, Ron. Thanks, everybody.